The Fram Corporation, makers of the world's finest oil, air, and fuel filters, brings you the NHRA World Championship Finals.
This is Brock Yates, reporting from the Southwest Drag Strip in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the scene of the National Hot Rod Association's World Championship Finals, the World Series of drag racing. The Tulsa World Finals is exactly what it claims to be, a winner-take-all runoff between the champions who have accumulated the most competition points in 7 National Hot Rod Association regions that span the country. Over 300 of these top cars and drivers are on hand at Tulsa to compete in 7 special eliminator categories that range from the elite top-fuel dragster bracket to the purely stock street sedans. With me is racing champion Big Daddy Don Garlits, the Babe Ruth of this frantic 200-mile-an-hour sport. Since he's not entered at Tulsa, Don and I discussed the challenges that drivers would face on the wind-buffeted Southwest Raceway drag strip. Don, with qualifications about to begin, let's talk a little bit about the critical factors involved with the starting line procedure. What will you do as you approach the line with your dragster?
Well, you have to pick a real good spot on the strip. That's very critical, the position of the car. And then the other factor that's very critical is your leave time, when you leave from the yellow to the green.
Are you actually leaving before the green light comes on?
You actually activate the clutch in the car before the green light comes on.
What kind of a time differential is that, really?
Well, it works around 200th of a second. The real good drivers are cutting it that close.
Well, say you were to leave a tenth of a second before your opponent left. What sort of an advantage would that give you?
Well, with a 220-mile-an-hour vehicle, that would give you about a 30-foot advantage at the other end.
How about the slower super stocks, which are only attaining velocities of about 130 miles an hour at the other end of the strip?
Well, this interval then comes back to about 17 or 18 feet, but still quite an advantage, as you can see.
Well, obviously, as you say, most of the races are won or lost here, but let's take a walk down to the other end of the drag strip and see what factors are involved down there.
Fine.
Well, Don, here we are about 350 feet away from the starting line. With a 1,500 horsepower fuel dragster, I can imagine things start getting pretty thrilling out here.
Right. After you come off the line, Brock, coming down the course, and the car's set on a ballistic course, just about however, that's why I said lining up on the line is very important. But out about 300 feet, where we are now, you just have to start steering. Front wheels are down on the ground pretty steady, everything's set up, you're getting traction. And this is where the fuel dragster driver's got his hands full.
What about traction here, about midway down the strip? Is the car still breaking traction, or is it beginning to really get a bite?
This is where it should be getting a real bite, and this is where the driver has a lot of work to do. He's either got to push the clutch down a little bit to stop the tires from smoking if they are, or if he's using the accelerator pedal to get the traction, he's got to start getting it on the wood pretty soon.
How about the super stocks? What is a good super stock driver doing at this point?
A good super stock driver, Brock, is he's watching his tack and he's getting his shift points just right. He doesn't have quite the steering problem that the fuel dragsters have, but it's very important on his shift points.
Is he involved in a traction problem like the big cars?
No, his big traction problem is back at the line, getting off without spinning the wheels at all. But out here, the super stock driver is usually flat on the wood.
Are there many drag races, both with the big cars and with the super stocks, that are resolved here? In other words, do many losing drivers get passed at this point, or does it usually occur very near the starting line?
Super stocks, I'd say most of the losing drivers get beaten at the line, not counting the starting sequence. But the fuel dragsters, this is where the good cars pass the mediocre cars.
Well, here we are, Don, 1,320 feet from where we started at the finish line. Exactly what sort of elements are involved down here regarding elapsed time and top speed? Those seem to be the two most important parts of drag racing as far as the records are concerned.
Well, the elapsed time is the time it takes the vehicle to go from the start to this line, the finish line.
Will the winner always get a lower elapsed time as he crosses this line?
Provided he left at the same time his opponent did, he'll have a lower elapsed time.
How about top speed? Will he always have a higher top speed?
No, not necessarily. It has nothing to do with the top speed and how fast he's going. It's just who gets to this line first.
So that the top speed that we hear recorded is merely the amount of time that it takes for a car to traverse the 132-foot timing trap. Is that right?
That's correct. It's not the average speed over the entire quarter, which is a misconception by many people who are watching this sport.
Don, it's about time for qualifications to begin, and unless we want to get hit by a 220-mile-an-hour dragster, let's move on.
Right, Brock.
Some of the biggest names in the sport have arrived at Tulsa to take a crack at a share of the World Finals' nearly $100,000 in prize money. In the fuel dragster class, Sneaky Pete Robinson, the Georgia Tech engineer, has returned with driver Steve Carboni to try for his second consecutive World Finals championship. Representing Southern California is Don Prudhomme, a lanky young man who has won most of the nation's big drag meets, but is still looking for his first Tulsa victory. Detroit's Connie Kalita is here with his long-nosed Bounty Hunter, a car that's won the prestigious Winter Nationals Championship. While local attention is focused on hometown hero Benny Osborne. The tremendously popular Superstock class is loaded with dozens of big-name drivers at the wheels of hot Chevrolets, Plymouths, Fords, and Dodges. Heading the list is the current national champion, Bill Jenkins. Ronnie Sox, driving the potent Sox and Martin Hemi Plymouth, is here. As is the always tough Ron Mancini in another factory-backed Plymouth. Dick Aarons, a top Camaro driver, is considered a major threat in this, the most competitive class in the entire Tulsa meet. These top stars, plus a raft of other contenders, face a rugged round of time trials and qualifying before the field is narrowed to 16 finalists in each of the 7 eliminator categories, a total of 112 cars and drivers to be selected out of this entry list of 300. And for everybody, the pressure is on.
Don, we've got an important qualifying round coming up here. It's an elimination match between Bill Mullen from Birmingham, Alabama, and Sneaky Pete Robinson from Atlanta, Georgia, to fill that final qualifying spot in the Division II runoffs. How does the race shape up?
Well, you know, Bill Mullins has got a little home-built dragster from Birmingham, and Pete Robinson is in the Factory Works car, the Ford-sponsored car, and this is like a David and Goliath match race. Shape a little bit off the line. Robinson took the win. Mullins had a terrific hole shot, and he got out just a little ways. The front end came up, and he got out of shape and had to lift momentarily. Could have cost him the race.
We've got a real crosswind here right now. Do you think that had any effect on the run?
Could have been, because when the front end came up on Mullins' car, the wind blew it the way that across to the pit side of the track.
Looked like there was an awful lot of smoke from both cars. What does that appear to be affected from the track, or was it the tires themselves?
All indications at this point indicate that the track hasn't got the bite that the racers were expecting out of it.
What do you think about this resurfacing job here, Don? It was scrape, as we talked about earlier, and now it appears to be breaking up a little bit.
Right, there's a lot of loose rocks coming up through the surface. They cut the top off this track by heating it and running a knife over it. This is the first time this has ever been done in the sport. Everybody's kind of standing by. They don't know exactly what to expect, but at this point it doesn't look like we're going to get the phenomenal ETs that we're accustomed to.
Pete Robinson, the defending World Finals champion, is a top-ranked star with heavy factory support. Like Don Prudhomme and several other big names at Tulsa, Robinson's car, called the Tinker Toy, is powered by an exotic overhead cam Ford engine, nicknamed a Cammer by the racing crowd. Pete is recovering from injuries suffered in a crash a few months earlier and is engaged a California pro, Steve Carboni, to drive his car at Tulsa.
Well, you just made a run which set low ET of the event up to this point. What do you think of the track condition out there?
It's fairly good. If the weather continues to be like it is, we can expect the same conditions tomorrow. They forecast rain. They have been better. Last year, Tulsa, the conditions were better.
Well, I've talked to several of the drivers, and, they scraped this track, and some of the drivers they're of the opinion that perhaps the track wasn't helped as far as traction was concerned. However, it is smoother. What do you think about that, Pete?
Well, I think it's definitely smoother. The bite is not what it could have been had it been done a different way, but I'm not, of course, an asphalt person. But the elapsed times this year will not affect the crowd because they will be lower than they were last year.
Well, that's right, because you've just turned a 7:13, and the lower elapsed time of the meet last year was turned by your car at 7:19.
While fuel drivers like Robinson worry about elapsed times in the 7-second bracket, a great percentage of the crowd's attention is devoted to the slower but bitterly competitive superstock classes. These automobiles, which are basically high-performance versions of the cars Mr. and Mrs. America drive on the street, run the quarter mile in 10 to 11 seconds and seldom exceed speeds of 130 miles an hour. Possibly the biggest name in all of superstock racing is an owlish, middle-aged mechanical genius named Bill Jenkins. Grumpy, as he's called by his friends, is acknowledged to be the toughest competitor in his class.
Well, Bill, they've cut this track back here to get it smoother. Have you made any adjustments or any changes to compensate for the traction out there?
Well, we're running maybe not quite as tight a gear ratio as we could, and a little bit taller tires. And I think tonight I'll probably take a little bit of flywheel weight out of it, about another 10 or 12 pounds flywheel weight out of it, to try to make it a little bit easier to drive, because in scraping the paving, they've made it a little bit sore, and it's kind of hard to get a hold of. It's not a real good seal on the surface, and as it gets used again, the rubber and the oil will get mixed up in the surface and seal it again, and it'll become as good as it was, but it's going to take some time. It may happen by tomorrow afternoon, and it might not. We're going to have to adjust for it if it does.
How do you stand in the field right now?
Well, I think I'm in number 4 position as far as the qualifying is concerned.
That doesn't mean a whole lot, though, does it, when you're as competitive as the superstock class is right now?
No, I believe actually there were a couple cases this morning when I was experimenting a little bit too much, and I could probably have gone a little bit quicker this morning as it was.
Another man who's experimenting to find the right combination is Ronnie Sachs, a Southern pro who teams with his mechanic, Buddy Martin, to form one of the toughest partnerships in big-time drag racing.
Well, early in the day, it was slowing them down right much, but we're getting some rubber on it right now, and it seems to be times are coming down right smart.
Who's in there as a contender as far as you're concerned right now, Ron?
Well, every one of the guys right now, it's only 1100ths difference, so it's anybody's race.
Didn't you have a little trouble earlier this morning in one of your runs?
Right, we were experimenting with some new transmission and didn't seem to work out too good.
Another driver who's having trouble at this point is 3-time Winter Nationals champion Connie Coletta and his bounty hunter. He hasn't been able to record competitive qualifying times, and he's far from pleased about his performance.
Well, my car didn't seem to work too good out there. We've got to do a little changing. It looks like the conditions are quite a bit different here, and looks like it's going to be just a little bit harder to get the cars to ET.
What kind of times did you run this morning?
I only run 750. I run 210, but it just couldn't get a hold of anything on the racetrack. They made a change here. They've scraped the racetrack, and there's a lot of loose pebbles that are being pulled up to the surface now, and it's really giving us a lot of problems.
How about this crosswind out here, Connie? Is this going to be any trouble?
Yes, it is. When I pulled from the parachute down in the lights here, it got all the car and slid it sideways on me, and it got into a couple of gyrations. This wind picks up any more this afternoon, which I believe it's supposed to. I think they're going to have a little bit of handling problems out here.
Will you do anything as far as gear ratios or setting the chassis up differently to counteract any sort of crosswind?
Not really, because the vehicle is all under a strain when it's under acceleration, and the car takes a set. The wind doesn't usually affect it. It's on acceleration. It's in the shutdown areas where you really get into trouble.
Don, Connie Collitta's on his way to the line. And what kind of a rough situation does he face as qualifying draws to a close?
Well, we've only got about an hour and a half left, Brock. The track is now as good as it's going to get today. Connie is running in the 750s. 750s are not going to make the program. He'll probably not get another run today. This is it. He's going to have to make it now or he's not going to make it. So here he comes. You can hear his engine coming up now, so let's see what it's going to be.
Right.
Coletta is very carefully staging. This is an all-important run. Coletta has lots of smoke. Awful lot of smoke. 7:55. Coletta probably will not make the program.
Fine draws to a close. A mass of drivers take to the track for one last crack at making the list of 16 finalists in their respective classes. Some make it, others, including big names like Tom McEwen and Connie Collitta, do not. They have no choice but to load up and begin the long trip home. For the men who made the finals, they face a night of tuning and a last-minute search for a few more horsepower before official elimination rounds begin in the morning.
France. 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 Fram is the filtering system for your car, too. The same Fram oil filters used by race experts the world over will keep the oil in your car's engine just as clean. Effective filtration is keeping dirt outside so that things work better inside. For oil, air, and fuel, the final word in filtration is Fram. They work on the track. They work on the road. Fram filters.
The wind is still rattling across the Oklahoma prairie, and the weatherman is predicting rain. But the drag fans have come anyway, thousands of them, to watch the contestants chew away at each other until only 7 champions remain. Two rounds of top fuel eliminations have been run off, and now suddenly only 4 drivers are left. Don Prudhomme, one of the coolest drivers in racing history, has been invincible all afternoon. Now he's approaching the line to face off against Larry Hendrickson.
And the win goes to Don Prudhomme. He will go into the final. A lap time 7.19 seconds.
Now it's dark horse Benny Osborne's turn to face the factory-backed might of Steve Carboni and the Robinson Fueler.
Benny Osborne making the turnaround. The super powerful machine of Pete Robinson is following. The red car with Steve Carboni doing the handling.
The storm begins to move in, and race officials hustle Bill Jenkins to the line to face dark horse Ed Miller from Rochester, New York, in the third round of the Superstock eliminations. Grumpy has found the right combination for the rugged Tulsa conditions and appears headed for the championship. But Ed Miller has other ideas. The countdown begins. There it is, a red light, meaning Grumpy left a wink too early and is disqualified. Miller's in the finals. And now it's Ron Mancini and Dick Ahrens, a pair of longtime Detroit crosstown rivals, squaring off in the second Superstock runoff. Mancini jumps eagerly toward the starting line. Aaron moves forward.
Just before the countdown starts. Keep an eye on that. There he goes, getting a foul.
There's the green, and there's another foul. In his attempt to stage his car, Mancini drove a few inches too far into the ultra-sensitive electric eye beams. The storm begins to move closer. Dick Ahrens and Ed Miller are hustled to the line for the Superstock championship run. Riding on the next few seconds is a special $10,000 award, the biggest ever for cars in this class. It's a perfect start, and they roar away into the gathering darkness. The crowd waits for the win light. It's Miller in a tight finish. But there's no time to celebrate Ed's victory now. The storm is moments away, and Benny Osborne and Don Prudhomme move to the line for the Top Fuel Eliminator Final. It's so dark that little more than the exhaust flames licking from the car's nitro-powered engines are visible. And they're neck and neck at the 8th mile. Then Benny makes his move, and the race is his. It's been an afternoon for the underdogs, but now the big winner is the weather, and the World Finals come to a sudden halt. While the rainstorm hammers down outside, National Hot Rod Association officials present the prize money and trophies to the 7 champions. Some of the biggest cheers are received by an unassuming Benny Osborne, a young man who unexpectedly beat the best in the business and underlined his win by turning in the low elapsed time and top speed of the meet. Ed Miller's upset victory in the Superstock class becomes all the sweeter with that extra $10,000, making him the biggest winner in the history of Superstock drag racing. Tulsa traditionally marks the end of the National Hot Rod Association's racing season, the last of the major events on the ever-growing schedule of big-time drag competition. A pair of underdogs, Benny Osborne and Ed Miller, outraced the favorites and the storm clouds to capture most of the headlines and to prove once again that it takes more than the latest cars and the most expensive equipment to win drag races, a point that Don Garlits himself has proved many times during his fabulous career.
Well, Don, we're back where we started, and it's been really a sensational weekend of racing, I must say. You know, now that this season is just about at an end and we've had all of our major NHRA events completed, let's reflect for a minute on what 1967 brought drag racing.
Well, Brock, it brought us the magic 6-second barrier was broken. The cars are running into 6 seconds consistently now. It's commonplace. 230 mile an hour has been broken. It's been a fabulous year.
What do you expect for 1968? More of the same?
Right. The innovations that are going to be brought about on these cars in the coming year are going to produce speeds probably approaching 250 miles an hour in the bottom of the 6s. Maybe we'll even see the top of the 5s. Who knows? The tires are fabulous, and we're going to see some new tricks on these fuelers in this next year that people aren't going to believe.
The Fram Corporation, makers of the world's finest oil, air, and fuel filters, has brought you the NHRA World Championship Finals.